I began this making this film, I think, in 2008, and I got really concerned with all of the fact that there seemed to be all these this confluence of events that we as a species were facing now in my lifetime, in our lifetime. It seemed to be sort of all unraveling, or at least coming to a head at this time, and so I was just deeply concerned about that. You would hear isolated aspects of this discussed, but never really as a whole thing, and never as a full picture. I was really trying to figure out, assemble a holistic image of what this crisis was, because it wasn't just ecological, it wasn't just societal, it wasn't just technological, it was all of these things. And so the first thing that I really found and wrapped my head around was this guy who's his name is Nick Bostrom, and he's the head of the Future of Humanities Institute at Oxford in England, and he wrote something called Global Catastrophic Risks, and it was sort of a compilation of philosophical papers and technological papers looking at these different aspects of the crisis. And so it was neat to, it was very academic and very heady. I understood only half of it, but it was good to see someone trying to assemble what are the major outliers that we're creating in our own time, or that we're facing in our own time. So I found a little conference being put on. It was only 15 or 20 scientists meeting in a room not really even open to the public. So I found out that was going on in Cupertino, like right where, in the heart of it was at the Computer History Museum. So I went to interview these guys and listen to what they had to say, and I really sort of had my mind blown that there were all these things, from nanotechnology to methane plumes to all these sorts of big things that could dislocate our civilization, and they're all starting to happen. So I kind of got an overall picture that weekend interviewing these people, and decided that's really what I wanted to make the film about, was let's try and tie these things together and get a whole image of what this crisis is. So then I was out in California. I was living in New York at the time. So I went to the week later. My friend and I, who had been filming this conference, were like, let's go and drive and find this last surviving Hopi elder, because I just had read on the internet that this guy was still around, and so we had a piece of paper, no address, just his name, and we went to go find Martin Gashwaseoma. So we hit the road, and when we went out there, and through a very serendipitous turn of events, we found him and got to meet him, I found out he's now deceased, but we got to talk to him. And so it was this kind of this pairing of this intellectual, academic perspective on the crisis with this indigenous perspective of the crisis. And I realized that they were both talking about the same thing, from different worldviews, from different understandings, depth of knowledge. So I had the naivety, I think, to just sort of try and figure out how to create a narrative, how to understand this crisis from those perspectives, trying to tie them together. And so when I asked Martin Gashwaseoma, the Hopi elder, can we interview you and put on the camera? And he said, well, people have come and they've interviewed me. I don't know where the footage is, and I don't, And he said, I'm very old, and the Earth has begun this process, so you're going to have to find some other elders to talk to. So that really kind of stuck in my head, and I realized, well, who are our elders? Who else should I be meeting with that understands this stuff and knows how this came about, what's happening, and what we can do about it? And so I guess what kept me going through all of the process was just that it's such a large question. It's something that I think we're only, people who've been trying to understand, or who have had an understanding of this, the complexity and the size of this issue, until now have been very few. And so it was really kind of a quest to go and find these elders and go and really try and understand the totality of what we're facing. So that was the thing that kept me going, is I got kind of addicted to trying to find more perspectives on this huge issue and try and understand the complexity. I didn't expect at all when I began this that it would lead me to the beginnings of agriculture, to looking at technology itself, and how it finds expression in our society. So it was I bit off a huge thing to try and chew. So it took many years, and I guess the thing that kept me going is that I was stubborn enough to just try and find an answer for myself. And what I didn't expect also in this is that how much of a personal journey it would be and how much it would change me and my life. And so even though I'm not in the film, I really tried to make the film a reflection of my process of sort of beginning and going, well, let's go back to the beginning, let's get kind of a history lesson of why we're facing what we're facing. And then sort of in the 3-act structure, I sort of built the film to be, how did this come about? And really trying to understand what civilization is, what civilization has done, what we've collectively done as a species. Then really try and face the modern unfolding of this crisis, because it's certainly coming to a head in our time. And that was sort of the 2nd act. And then the 3rd act was really sort of how do we incorporate this information, how do we incorporate and face this crisis, but then deal with it and create a better humanity through what we face. We went on a series of legs of trips to film this. So one summer we left New York to go to Detroit to interview Grace Lee Boggs, and I was very frazzled. We were trying to figure out, I'll do all this pre-production and figure everything out. It was very complex, so I didn't have time to delve enough into her work, even really understand the context of her work enough. I was just playing catch-up. So when we got there, this is one of those really special, life-changing moments. As I got there and I sat and I was a little frazzled, and she said, okay, so what's your film about? And I kind of rambled on for 20 minutes because I didn't know at that point. I'm midstream, I'm just running around interviewing people, and I kind of just spoke a whole bunch just to make up for not really being clear. And she went, okay, and what do you want from me? And so I said, well, and I did the same thing where, well, I think we need this and I think we need that, and I would love to talk about this aspect and this aspect. And she went, you haven't done your homework, have you? And I went, and I felt like a little school child and who was being sort of scolded, and it was really humbling and very sobering, and being like, okay. And so she stood up, she walked over to where she sort of has her books and papers and pamphlets and things. She made a big stack. She said, why don't you come back tomorrow at the same time and we'll try this again? And so I took that really to heart, and that changed my entire process. And then, one of the people who works at the Boggs Foundation spoke to me on the porch outside, and she said, and he said, Grace does this, and it's sort of a challenge. You should really just take this to heart, do your best, and see what you can do. So we drove around Detroit all day, going through the physical environment of where she's from and where she's done her work, and read. And there was 3 of us in the van, and so we were all reading different parts of the pamphlets to each other, and throwing through and making notes, and we're filming. And so I got this real quick education on her and the context for her work, and also the decay and the rebirth and the beauty in that city, which is so inspiring and amazing. We went to a small urban farm where there was a lineup of people with EBT tickets, and instead of getting crappy food from the supermarket, they were getting fresh vegetables, trays of food. Seeing that there was this amazing movement happening there, I got very clear. And then the next day I went back and I had 4 questions for Grace, and they're very, very pointed. So our interview was incredibly short, but I could have used the thing in its entirety, and it was perfect. On the outside, going to Detroit, you have these images that people love to display of the city, of it in decay and of it in turmoil and depressed and all these things, which is I'm not going to pretend like that's not there. Of course it is, but underlying that is a whole new paradigm, a whole new societal shift that's happening that I didn't expect, and was actually the most hopeful and kind of beautiful example that I saw in this whole country going around. And just I think this is going to dovetail this into something else I've been thinking about, but it fits with Detroit, is that I see a lot of these articles being written about the doom and gloom, and certainly my film has a lot of doom and gloom, but they're very much about like, well, that's it, folks, civilization's over, pack your bags, go to bed, just give up, we're all gonna die and it's terrible. And what Grace has what's so beautiful about her work and about her as a human being is that she has helped envision and co-create this what post-civilization can look like. What's something beyond this? What's better than this? What's more equitable? What's more fair? What's a reboot, a proper and meaningful new chapter for humanity? And and I think that she's right in that this period of unlimited prosperity, of unlimited growth, comes to an end. And Detroit is an example of that. But that's not the end of the world. That's not the end of humanity. That something new and meaningful and beautiful will come from this, and can come from this. It certainly doesn't have to. We can just give up and, stockpile things and have guns and, have a Mad Max future. But that's so uncreative. My perspective on how I hope the film would affect people is the same as how I think it affected me. And I tried to make the film something of a reflection of what happened to me. In my understanding, and the people I found, the amazing people I found who are really working on incredible solutions. And solutions is a funny term, because solution sort of comes from this paradigm of problem and solution. We got to fix it. We got these kinds of things. I think it's much more a return to a more better integration with our natural environment. I think that's sort of the end goal. That's my biggest sort of message, is that because we don't really know how to live, we need so much in order to live. And I think that many other people on this planet are a better expression of what you really need to live, and live a wonderful, meaningful, harmonious kind of existence. And I think that that really is sort of, for our society, for sort of North America, Europe, for the more developed nations, I feel like we need to really take a hard, long look at what we actually need. We clearly don't need much of this stuff that we're creating or consuming. And when you look at if you start getting into the data of the global crisis, you start seeing how much energy we use. You see how much waste we create. You see how, the amount of grain we feed the cattle to raise our beef could feed the world's hungry 7 times over, things like that. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of choices that we make that affect the way all of us can live, and I think that we've found those limitations, and so we need to really, I think, in creating a new future for everybody, for ourselves and for everyone else on the planet, we need to really envision, what do we actually need? How can we better and more efficiently utilize what we have?